It is still week one. I am still Emily Ray. Libby Perry is still your instructor, and we are about to embark on what I consider to be probably the most important lecture that you'll hear all month. Let me give you a little background story about this. I've been teaching this class for close to 3 years now, and it is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of freelancing and consulting in these areas. When I first started teaching this class, I found myself having to give the same feedback over and over and over and over again about little things. I was like, man, this is driving me bananas. And then I thought, what if on the very first day I put together a lecture that highlighted the top 10 things that I wish students would do or know or become proficient at over the course of the month. So to me, this lecture is, if you guys can commit to applying these concepts and techniques in your work over the month, then you will have won the course. I'm telling you, if you can just take these 10 points and apply them successfully in your work, consider yourself an editing for the web superstar. Dun, dun, dun. There used to be 7, and it was called the 7 Deadly Sins, but as it turns out, there needed to be 10. So obviously, this lecture is called the 10 Commandments. All right, commandment number 1, create meaningful hyperlinks and launch them in a new browser window when appropriate. What do you think I mean by meaningful? Or let's say meaningfully titled hyperlinks.
Like, don't just put a hyperlink in there to put one in there, like make sure it's there to do something and
All right.
get your end goal there.
Okay, so don't just put a link in for a link's sake, but more specifically, I'm asking, don't just copy and paste a straight up URL out of the browser window and post it anywhere. Because when you give a link a meaningful title, you are giving your user extra information and extra confidence and extra guidance on knowing that that is a link that they should or want to click, right? So when you create a meaningful title for your hyperlinks, what you're doing is you are giving your user an indication, hopefully a very intuitive indication of the content that they're going to find there. Right? So here's an example that I call the good, the bad, and the ugly. The red text that's underlined is supposed to be indicative of a link up there, right? And so the first example is the good, and the link is titled the Week 1 Project. If I were to click on that, where do you think I would go? The Week 1 Project. It's intuitive, and it lets you know where you're going to end up. If I title my link, click here for more, where do you think it's going to go?
Expand what you're already looking at.
So, I mean, you might think that it's going to expand what you're looking at, but the truth is, you just don't know, right? You just don't know. And so, like, it has been a link that has been titled, but it's a generic title. It's not specific, right? And so that's why I call it just the bad. I mean, it's an example of a titled link, but it's not a meaningfully titled link. And then the bottom example is the ugly example. And that is just a straight up URL. That's what you would see at the top of your Chrome or Firefox window, and you would just copy that and paste that out of that. Now, within a URL, you can kind of parse and see a folder structure, or maybe words that look familiar or that mean something to you, if you took the time to really look at it closely. But who does that? Because when we are online, we are moving through content and making decisions at the speed of light. Nobody's sitting there trying to look at a URL and try to determine where it's going to take us specifically, right? So here's another good example. How many of you have seen what a link to a Google Doc looks like? Right? It's usually about 3 or 4 lines of just absolute chaos in terms of a collection of letters and numbers that don't really give us any indication of where we're going to end up. So I know, looking at both of these links, that they both go to the same place. But the second link, which is meaningfully titled, actually tells you where you're going to end up, which is the example proposal. Anytime I can, I like to take these examples back into FSO because it is an environment that as students and teachers we are both uniquely familiar with. So this is a screenshot of FSO 3. Rest in peace, we miss you. But so like this is a real screenshot of a discussion board. And it just so happened that there were 3 examples of the good, the bad, and the ugly right there. So the first one, it might be hard to see on the projector screen, but the submission says blow period, your period, mind period. And we can tell by the color of the orange text in your that is the actual link to someone's assignment, right? And so I can appreciate humor and I can appreciate the confidence that this student has that his submission is just going to be so amazing that it's going to blow my mind. But it is an example of a poorly titled link, right? Because it doesn't give me any real indication of where I'm going to go. The second example, here's the link to my week 1 practice project inventory, and we can see by the color of the orange text that the week 1 practice project inventory is the link. Now this is the good example because it lets us know that when we click on that, we are most likely going to end up at that individual's week 1 practice project inventory. And then the last example is the gobbledygook. That is when someone has just copied and pasted a URL out of their browser window into the discussion board. And so you can see here what those look like in real life and in an environment that we both use daily. So when I say make sure that your links have a meaningful title and that they launch in a new browser window when appropriate. It is appropriate to launch your links in a new browser window when they will take the user away from the environment that the user has chosen to go to specifically, right? So let me give you an example. In FSO, why do I go to FSO? As your instructor, why do I go there? To grade, right? To look at your submissions, right? But you post a link in there, and let's say your link takes me out of FSO and takes me to your YouTube channel. Aside from infuriate me, why is that problematic? If you think about my user experience in FSO.
Because, wait, are you saying that it doesn't go into a new tab?
Yeah, I'm saying that it does not go into a new tab.
It makes it harder for you to go back and get to someone else's thing.
That's right.
Become confusing.
That's right. So it negatively impacts my user experience in that environment, right? So when I go to FSO, I go there to look at everybody's work and then to provide feedback and submit grades. And you're going to find, as we continue the discussion this month, that people use the web to generally do one of 3 things, which is complete a task, satisfy a goal, or get a question answered, right? So the reason why I'm going to FSO is to complete a task, and that task is grading. And when I go click your link, and your link takes me somewhere else where I cannot complete my task, you have negatively impacted my experience in that environment. So I get kind of meta when we talk about this, but like, you guys are web strategists this month. Most every month you're media strategists, but I'm going to call you web strategists this month because I want you to start thinking about these choices that you're making that impact user experience, right? When you are posting your information in FSO, I am your target audience. Like, I am the one who is the consumer of that information. So I want you to be thinking about, as you share content in FSO, in this interactive online environment, our learning management system, I am your user. So when you are posting things, think about my user experience when I'm going to interact with that content. Conversely, when I post things in FSO, you are my target audience. You are my users. And you better believe that I think about your experience of this content and I make certain decisions so that it is a pleasant user experience. So in FSO 4, this is a screenshot from there, they recently changed how you set up links to mimic more of what we saw in FSO 3. So when you type something in the editing window there, so we call that a WYSIWYG editor. It stands for what you see is what you get. You're not looking at code here. You're basically looking at what looks like a word editing interface. So when you type in the word up there on the screen, it says content strategy. When you highlight that and go to the toolbar and select the link, insert link, you're going to see a dialog box. When that box comes up, you have the ability to put in a URL, right? So that's where you're going to copy and paste that gobbledygook from your browser window. And then they give you the option to put text. And that text is where you're going to put your meaningful title, right? So here, what I did was I went and wrote content strategy first. And so when I inserted link, it automatically populated that in the text area. And then here's the important part. You see that little toggle box down there? Open your link in a new tab. Now that's the one I want to make sure that you guys are selecting anytime you post a link in FSO that takes you away from FSO. Does that make sense? Awesome. Commandment number 2. It's very important when you are sharing content online to leverage headings, titles, lists, anything that can help you avoid super dense blocks of text. And the reason why we do this is because people don't spend a lot of time reading every single word of what you put online. Again, they are looking for an answer, they are trying to complete a task, or they are satisfying a goal of some kind while they are there. They're not there to consume every single word that you put on the page. So it's likely they're looking for something on these sites that you build. Make it easy for them, and then you have given them a pleasant user experience. The more scannable your content is, the more pleasant it is for your user. So looking at this screen here is just kind of an example with some placeholder text. You can see that the text on the right has been broken up with a title, headings, subheadings, and bulleted lists, and it facilitates a much easier scan of that information to possibly provide just that one pearl of wisdom or chunk of info that you are looking for. So I talked a few minutes ago about you guys being my target audience or my users for the content that I create and share in FSO, right? Here's an example of one of your assignments for the class. And that looks like an awfully dense block of paragraph text, doesn't it? So this would be an example of me not practicing what I preach. This would mean me just copying and pasting a bunch of text from one environment to the other and not really thinking about how you guys are going to consume it in FSO. These are things that I know about my target audience in FSO. You guys are students. You're busy. You're completing homework assignments that are going to determine your grade. There's a certain amount of anxiety that's associated with that, right? Because it's like, am I going to be able to get all of the requirements? Am I going to get all of the points that I need for this? How can I go back and find, where did I see that one point? I know I saw it somewhere, but this big block of text does not make it easy for you guys to go back and feel comfortable that you are getting the information that you need or that you can revisit and find those points as needed. Here is a slide of me like practicing what I preach. I have applied headings, subheadings, and bulleted lists here to your curriculum. So that way, when you are reading through your assignments, like you guys can scan this. And what is it that she wanted about? Oh, the images. Yes, okay. I can make sure that I can hit those 3 points that are very easily identified right there. And this almost becomes a checklist of sorts to help ease that anxiety that you feel about, submitting your homework assignments and making sure that you're hitting all of the points needed to get full credit for your submissions. All right. Commandment number 3. Never center align paragraph text. It decreases the readability of that. Now, you say, never center align paragraph text? No. Well, yes, never center align paragraph text, but you can center align small bits of text, right? So here's an example of paragraph text. This is a descriptive this is placeholder text, but it is a heavy in description, let's say that, more than a few sentences. And you can see that it's the same paragraph, but the paragraph on the bottom is left aligned. Now, the reason why this decreases the readability of your content is that in English, we read from left to right. And as our eyes get to the end of that line, it is easier for us if the new starting point is at the same spot, that we have identified that hard edge on the side. It makes it easier for us to go from line to line in reading that content, right? So Again, never, not never, never for paragraph text, but titles, headings, and subheadings are fine to center align, right? Nothing maybe more than a few words is okay to center align in what it is that you do, right? So it would look something like this. Here you can see that I've got 2 sentences of descriptive text, so I've gone ahead and I've left aligned that because I want to make it easy for people to read, but I've center aligned the headings over that, and that's fine. You might want to keep them left aligned. There's a certain amount of leeway in terms of the stylistic approach that you're going to take here, but always consider the usability and the readability of what it is that you create. Again, you're trying to ensure a smooth experience for your users. And by smooth, I mean just like something that's, 1, not offensive, and 2, like doesn't jump out as like, oh, this is a disconnect. Why did this designer do this? A smooth experience is one that's seamless and doesn't really raise any questions about why the designer did what they did, right? Commandment number 4, never copy and paste content from one environment to the next. Have any of you guys ever had the issue where, let's say you are composing something in Microsoft Word and you've like given it certain styles, fonts, colors, whatever, you know, different sizes, different spacing, and then you're like, I'm going to paste this in FSO, and you copy it, but it doesn't translate? That's because they are 2 different environments, right? Microsoft Word as a word, you know, as a processing document, it's a WYSIWYG editor. We talked about that, you know, you just basically put your cursor on the screen and you start typing, and then you maybe highlight a bit of text and you apply a style, bold, Times New Roman, italic, whatever the case may be, and we see those changes reflected right in front of us on the screen. But what you're not seeing is that there's code behind the scenes telling that text to look the way that it looks. When you copy and paste stuff from Word, it's going to copy and paste the coding on the other side of it. And that coding is very specific to the environment that it was created in, right? So when you take that and you paste it into, let's say, FSO or a content management system, you are likely copying and pasting a bunch of unintended code that CMS system doesn't exactly know what to do with. I will say that content management systems are getting better at interpreting things like this, but it's not perfect, right? So a few months ago, I was subbing for Jason's class, and he was so nice, and he basically set everything up for me, and he said, like, he would send me just like a little to-do list on a timeline. He said, okay, on this date, I want you to send the welcome letter, and it was all in a Google Doc. And I was like, this is easy peasy. And so I copy that text right out of the Google Doc, and then I go to my Outlook and I put it in my Outlook, which is a different environment, right? It's no longer, I'm working on Google Docs, which is web-based. I'm now in my email client. And I start a new message. I put everybody's email addresses in there, and I just hit send. And then this is how the students received my email. Right? Because there were line breaks, there were different formatting in that Google Doc, there was all kinds of things happening behind the scenes that I can't see with my little eye that I copied and I put it right into my Outlook. And Outlook was like, I don't know what you mean by all this, so I'm going to display your email like this. So it goes both ways, copying from the web into another environment or copying and pasting from, let's say, something like Word or Excel into an online environment. The interpretation can be wonky. So how do you approach this? There are 2 things. Either 1, you develop the content in the environment that you intend it to be in, right? So if it is for a website, you develop it in the website. If it's for FSO, you develop it in FSO. You type it up there. But some people think that's a little risky in that what if I type up my 400-word analysis activity and then FSO glitches and I've lost it completely? Fair enough. That has happened. So sometimes people like to compose in, let's say, Word and then copy and paste. The way that you can account for these behind-the-scenes styles is that you copy that text and you paste it into a plain text editor like TextEdit, right? That is an application that you guys have on your Macs. It is a native program. So if you go to your apps and you look up text edit, it will allow you to work in plain text mode, which means there are no formats, there's no styles, there's no bar at the top that says you can bold, you can change the font. It is literally text on the screen, no options. It will also allow you to work in a rich text environment, which will allow you to apply styles and stuff. That's not what you want. So go to your preferences and change it to a plain text document, right? Actually, I'm going to really quickly exit the presentation and just show you. Here it is down here, text edit in my doc. You can see it there. If I go ahead and launch this, let's see here. All right, so I already have one document open here, and you can see that there's no styles applied to this. This is just text. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this one. I have this because I was working on a website where I was copying information from one place, and I needed to strip it of all of the styles before I put it into the website. That's why I have it here. All right, so I'm going to close that one. I'm not going to save it, and I'm going to hit new. Right, so you can see here that it has opened a new little window, but there's no formatting options. Hello, there is no formatting anywhere. The only thing I can do is I am zooming in the view of this because my poor old teacher eyes can't look at it that small. I'm just making the zoom bigger. I'm not actually changing the font size on this, right? But, so this is a plain text document. This is where you could go format, make rich text, right? So plain text, rich text. Now you can see when I made it rich text, now all of a sudden I have some formatting options here. Helvetica, no thank you. Oswald, yes please. And let's make it humongous. There are certain stylistic bits of information that is attached to this information now that is causing it to look the way that it looks on your screen. If I were to copy and paste the information from here and paste it into another environment, that environment might not be able to interpret. Now, why do I spend so much time talking to you guys about this? Because you are going to be getting a folder full of content for Real Deal Tacos, and you're going to be getting PDFs that were generated in Word. And many times you will be tempted to just copy and paste the text right out of that PDF and put it right into your website. And you know what it's going to do? Make it look funny. And you know what I'm going to do? Mark you off for it, right? Let's pay attention to this one. It's a very, very common and easily sidestep issue. All right, back to, let me just make sure that all my notifications aren't bothering us in here. All right, so back to, I think we're here. All right. Commandment number 5. Please, pretty please, never display text as an image. Please do not give me a picture of words. Now this one requires a little bit of explanation. So what I'm talking about here is when someone screenshots a document and posts that picture of a document online instead of just putting actual text on the page. Right? This is problematic for several reasons. The first one is usability. When you are creating a screenshot of words, it becomes an image, and there's certain compression associated with an image, so it's not such a large file, right? You want smaller file sizes so they load faster, especially when we were on dial-up back in the day. So the compression in the image causes text to look blurry, which makes it harder to read, which makes this a usability issue. It's also bad for SEO, right? So search engines can't recognize that text as rich keyword content because all it is a picture of words. It is a collection of pixels in the shape of letters that form words and sentences that a search engine cannot read. Right? So you might have all of this great content that, just really establishes you as a budding photographer or content developer or video editor, and you might have an amazing portfolio, but if all of your keyword and rich content comes in the form of pictures, your search engines aren't going to be able to find you. All right, this was a fun example. This is an old version of the Full Sail website. It's been changed since. But I was in this class and I had just finished the 7 Deadly Sins version of this lecture, and we were on a break, and one of the students was like, "What's the next class after this?" And I was like, "I don't know, let's go to the Full Sail website and take a look." And she's like, "Oh, there they all are. I want to copy and paste this information and put it into like a document or a calendar or something." She wanted to use this information for something else. And she put her little cursor on the page and she went to copy and paste it. And what she found was this was not a data table. This was not words on the screen. This was a picture of words. And so in that instance, she got a very swift lesson in usability, because she wanted to take this information and do something else with it, but she couldn't because of the way that this designer set this up, right? In a limiting fashion. This has since been corrected. The new version of this is totally a data table and can be copied and pasted, but it was such a timely and just like an aha, I told you moment in the classroom. All right, so where do I see this happening? For the most part in this class, you guys, is first in, let's say, your content placement for the Real Deal Tacos scenario. You have been given a folder full of content that you can use to build this site. But your job in that project is not just to copy and paste all of the information from one environment to the next. Your job is to also decide, does all of this information, does all of this wordiness, how can I break up this text? How can I make this more easily scannable? Do you need 5 pages of an about story on a fish taco truck? What is the essential that our users need and that is essential for the business as well? So as a web strategist, you have the job of taking that content and providing in a way that's optimal for this online interactive medium. The temptation is copying and pasting from a PDF into a website, and you're going to get funny formatting as a result. So a lot of students then screenshot the PDFs, which were made from Word documents, and then just post that as an image on the site. I created those documents, so it's really easy for me to be able to go, that's my document, and that's a picture of it. And then I just put my little cursor on the page, and I click and I drag, and I can just see that it's an image, right? So the other place that I see this in this class is on your resume. So in week 3 and 4, we make the shift to working on your portfolios. And a lot of students like to include a resume or resume information. Now, I kind of go off on a little tangent here, but it's important to the overall discussion of what we're doing, designing for this environment, this interactive environment. People love print design because you can pixel perfect it, right? Like it doesn't have to look good on a giant cinema screen or a mobile phone, right? When I design something for print and I know that it's going to go on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, I know that you're going to see it the same way as Brian sees it and the same way that Libby sees it. There's a level of micromanaging within the design that happens there. But responsive design, and that's basically like mobile design or design for multiple devices, it basically requires you to set up your content in modular ways that will refloat and respond to whatever environment you're viewing it on. Because the way that we see a website on an iPhone is different than the way we see it on our MacBooks, is different than the way we see it on a giant cinema display, projected in the classroom, right? And so with resumes, students want, they in their mind, they think, oh, well, this is a print document. Well, historically, resumes have been print documents that you would send. In recent years, it's more like an electronic document that you're sending, but it still kind of takes on the page dimensions of 8.5 by 11 in case someone wants to print it out. But if you guys are having a portfolio site, why not just have that information on a page with your experience, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a quote-unquote resume. It can have all of your resume-esque type information, but just be there right on the screen. This is beneficial to you because 1, people don't have to download something and reopen it in another area. 2, it becomes keyword-rich content associated with you, where you've worked, and the experience that you have, right? But what I see is students who have created what they believe to be a very visually stunning resume in Microsoft Word or Photoshop, and they will screenshot that, and then they will place that image into their website. which is problematic for the reasons we already discussed. All right, commandment number 6, observe consistent padding. Now this is something that you will hear in various ways throughout your time in MCBS. You will definitely hear it in your graphic design class with Jacob. He describes it as creating tangents when you're putting objects too close together. I say observing consistent padding, and I say padding because that's generally a term that, or a classification or a descriptor that you can use in CSS styling to define basically the bubble wrap that's around a piece of content. I can say, give me 25 pixels around this entire image so that no other content can butt up against it. That's why I call it padding. I want you to think breathing room, making sure that your elements aren't butting up against each other or butting up against the edges of the container that the content is in. This is what it looks like visually. So the top example up here is, I'm going to call that just a content box, like the white content box, and I've filled it with text. But what I've done is I've not put any padding inside the image or inside that white background, right? So you can see that that text is really butting up against the edges of that container, right? When I say observe consistent padding, go ahead and make sure that there's like a good 25 to 50 pixel buffer around your content within that container. So I did it in an opaque way in the middle example so you could see that it's consistently being applied. And then in the bottom example, sort of the final reveal, I brought that opacity back to full so that you can see that that content is now comfortably floating in that container and has room to breathe in there. So another thing about this slide that you can notice is on the outside of these white containers that I've created, you're going to see enough padding around them so that they're not butting up against each other, right? So the blue space, right? You can see there's consistent blue space in between these elements, right? This works the same for images, guys. So like if you are placing an image inside of a container, make sure again that it's not butting up against the edges of that container. Same sort of concept and the same fix here. 25, 50 pixels all the way around, top, bottom, left, and right. Make sure that those are comfortably floating in the areas. Give them some white space. All right, commandment number 7, ensuring color and texture contrast for maximum readability, right? So, few things. Here is a quick test. Can you read this? How about now? How about now? How about now? And then there's a fourth one which you probably can't really read. It's super light. So we can see in here that the black text on the white offers maximum readability. That one's just pops the best. The gray, it's readable, but you know, kind of on this blown out monitor, it might tax your eyes if you had to look at it for a long time. The red stands out, you know, pretty well, but like you also need to think about the color choices and what they're communicating to your audience. You've all been through aesthetics and you've gotten a little dose of color theory at this point. Like, what are some of the connotations that red text brings up? What?
What do you mean? Sorry.
What are the connotations that the color red, like what are some associations metaphorically or?
Like angry.
Angry, yes.
Warning.
What? Warning, danger, absolutely, right? And so would red be a good font color choice for, let's say, a Zen Spa website? Probably not, right? And so you can see that your color choice also needs to play into the design aesthetic, the branding, and the overall message that you want to communicate with those color choices. So here, I've gone ahead and I've taken away this white background and I've put it on top of a textured background. Now textures are great in web design because it creates an illusion of dimension and space and layeredness, right? And a lot of people like to you know, put text over images or text over patterns or textures. There's a few things that you guys need to know about this. One, if you are putting text over an image or a texture, that text is still the most important thing that needs to be seen. Otherwise, why the heck would you be including it at all? So if you cannot clearly read the text, something needs to change about what's going on here. And an easy way to do that while still kind of getting that added dimension or the look of depth with using textures is to put like basically a canvas behind it. And you can raise and lower the opacity or raise and lower the shadowing on that canvas to have your text fully stand out. Now, it's not, you can't really see it as well on the monitor as you can here on my laptop screen, but that's an opaque background. And so some of that texture, some of the linearity of the polygons in that design, the shadowing is still coming through, but I can still clearly read the text that it's on top of. One of the areas that I see this most in the sites that you guys are going to create is in header images, right? Like large, beautiful banner images people like to put at the top of their site that takes up at least 1/3 to half of the screen. It's got a very landscape or horizontal orientation, and they'll put some sort of busy image back there, but then put text on the top of it, and it makes the text virtually illegible. So the way that you would accommodate for that is you would blow out the color so that it was like, let's say, a much wider image, and you could use dark text on top. Or you could apply kind of just like an opaque shadowing over that image, and then you could put light text on top, and that's how you ensure the readability of those things. Commandment number 8. Please add image titles and descriptions anytime you're using a gallery or a slideshow or things of that nature. It's like dotting your I's and crossing your T's for a designer. It also helps with the search engine optimization of the site by adding other elements of rich keyword content. So if you do not, so let's say you use Wix or Weebly or Squarespace or any of those things, and you're using a gallery module or a functionality in those spaces. If you do not go in and put in the title or a description, either they will put some sort of placeholder text in there, like image description, or it will default to the file name of the image, right? And so here, this is definitely a picture of corn tortilla chips. But the file name is corn tortilla chips close up, right? And so that kind of makes sense because we can see that it's somewhat relevant and related. But most images are coming with file names like dsc1003.jpg, which doesn't mean anything, to anybody. So that's why you guys need to go in anytime you are creating slideshows, galleries, and making sure that you're putting in that metadata. Why? Again, accessibility and SEO. SEO for the keyword richness of the content. Accessibility because if those images fail to load, that title and the description gives the user an indication of what is supposed to be there, right? So if that image never comes in, but the alt text or the title shows up, oh, that was supposed to be corn tortilla chips. Got it. Mystery solved. Commandment number 9. You guys, please mind the folds of your sites to minimize scrolling for the most important bits of content. Now, I always used to love this part of the lecture because I would call on Libby Perry. When we were tag teaming this, it was like our bit where I would say, do you guys know what the fold is? And then nobody would know. And then I would say, Libby, what's the fold?
Back in the day, I worked at the newspaper, so this refers to an old newspaper term whereby you always had your most important heading in the news of the day at the very top of the A page, which is your A section. And therefore, when it would go into the vending machines that you would see next to restaurants or at the airport, and it would be folded and stacked for delivery, anyone walking by would be able to see the most important head of the day, whatever happened, and be prompted to purchase that. So that refers to above the fold of the old newspaper.
Yep, so the most important pieces of information, the most intriguing, the most clickable, the most intuitive options for your audience, for your content need to be before someone starts to scroll. Now, one of the beauties of websites is that you can scroll, that there's no sort of limit. Content could go on for days and days and days, and it's free to do that, right? As opposed to print where, man, like you're jumping up in costs when you go from 2 pages to 8 pages. It's astronomical, but you could have go from 2 pages to an 8-page site and not incur any other costs. Or you could have a 1-page site that has enough content for 8 pages that you just have to scroll for. But again, part of what we are coaching you here in this class is to be thinking about your user experience and how they are going to be interpreting your content, and to be thinking about what's important to them and how can I design this site to best facilitate their experience in finding what they need, right? So this is an example of the old Full Sail website. So before we take a look at the elements on this page, let's ask ourselves, who is the target audience for the Full Sail website? Students, but what kind of students? Future students, prospective students, right? This site is for students who don't know anything about Full Sail, but just know they want to go to a badass media, arts, and entertainment college, right? So let's take a look at how Full Sail responds to their target audience, which are prospective students. So up at the top, we have clear branding information. Full Sail University, you're here. We have very clear and intuitive navigation options. You want to find out about the programs? You want to find out about our admissions? We do online classes. We've got news, grad stories, your career. Oh my goodness, and look, we even offer scholarships. Okay, that's pretty attractive for a potential student. But let's see what else is on here. We could very easily engage in a chat with somebody online. I can get information if I'm interested in touring the campus. And then we've got a huge tagline right there, real world education. Just in case you didn't know, that's what we're about here at Full Sail, and they put that front and center. But even beyond sort of the text and the navigation options that we're seeing on the page here, look at that banner image, right? That was a very carefully chosen banner image because it's like, whoa, look at these cool facilities. Oh my gosh, that guy is so neat. He's got tattoos and like weird hair, and we're going to do a collaboration together, and this is the place for me, right? They didn't do like a boring picture of just, let's say Zaxley's or some other piece of campus that, isn't as enthralling for prospective new students. Full Sail was very thoughtful in the design of this. This was just a screenshot of the site from my website or from my MacBook before I had to scroll and look at all of the options that are available to me, right? Not all of the content of the entire site has to be in the area, but clear branding, clear messaging, clear reaching out to the target audience and putting the information that they want to find in an easily intuitive location. That's what we're talking about when we say mind the fold. All right, last but not least, this one's a little meta. Commandment number 10, offer context for your content. Relevancy is key, right? And so I'm going to detail this a bit more so you are sure to understand what I mean by give me the context to understand the content on the page. So in many classes, your instructors will say, hey, as a part of this assignment, I want you to watch a Linda. And aside from answering these response questions or anything else that they ask you to do when you watch it, many times they'll say, post your certificate. And in the past, what I would see is a whole bunch of students just posting their certificate to the blog with no other information whatsoever. It was just a picture of a lynda.com in the body of a blog post. Now, okay, as the instructor, I already know that you were asked to do this and that you're a student and that I already have a certain amount of context to understand the content that you've put on this web page. But web pages are public and anybody can access them. And so if a stranger who didn't know you at all came to your blog, would they know what you're doing or why you chose to put that there? And so I began asking students just to succinctly give me a little bit of an explanation for why you're posting what you're posting. And so here, this student did a beautiful job of just giving me 2 sentences. And it says, in this activity, I was asked to watch Linda to gain a basic understanding of the foundational principles of the web. The aim was to introduce concepts and techniques specific to the web and identify which skills I need to develop to support my career objectives in this medium. Man, she tells me that she's in a course and that this is why she's doing it and that she completed this tutorial. And now, if I didn't know her or know that she was a student or know what any of this was, I have just enough information to make sense of it, right? And so what you guys are going to see in FSO is that I ask you guys to submit all of your work in the form of a blog post. And I do that for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that you guys, when you create a blog post, it's just like creating a web page, basically, are demonstrating for me your ability to apply these in concepts and techniques, not just in your homework, but in the way you post your homework, right? I told you I'm going to get kind of meta here. You're not graded on that, but it is an indication for me as an instructor to the extent that you are applying what you're hearing and knowing, okay, this just doesn't apply to my homework assignment. How does this apply in my everyday interactivity online, right? The other reason why I ask you guys to post to your blogs is because many times as you go through your time here at Full Sail, you will lose things on your computer. You will accidentally delete files. You will forget what you did in a class. You will lose access to the classes in FSO and not have any of the work that you've done. And so this is really designed for you to have a chronological history of your growth in media communications. And while not every classes require you to post to a blog, I actually encourage you guys to get into the habit of chronicling your experience and reflecting on it in this medium. Not only is it a great practice opportunity, but it's also it can show you everything that you've done for the time that you've been here and in this insane accelerated course of study. All right, I'm going to wrap things up, you guys, with a story. I know this was a long lecture, but it was such an important one. And again, you'll be getting the archive so you can refer back to any of these things that we talked about. And I spend the time doing this on the front end because, again, if you guys can apply these thinking points to what it is that you create this month, you will be heads and tails above the rest. So we'll wrap this one up with what I like to call the legend of Dan Tilley. Now, Dan Tilley was an MCBS student very early on. Very likable guy. He used to have a big afro. He kind of looked like Sideshow Bob, right? And just everybody loved him because he was just, not only was he nice, but he was really talented, right? Everything that he did in class, he applied himself, and you were just like, this guy's going to go far. He's going to go far. And I had him in portfolio, like I have had all of you guys in portfolio, and Dan submitted his portfolio website to me. And it was beautiful. It was WordPress, which, is a more complicated content management system. So already he's impressed me by choosing that as his content management system. But it was a real minimalist design and just black and white color scheme, text-based logo. Because Dan Tilley wasn't a designer, or he didn't have any flair for graphics or things like that. He was more on the production side of things. And he designed his portfolio site to really highlight the content itself. The site was not a piece of artwork. It was a blank canvas or a gallery wall where he would post his content and let it shine, right? And Dan, I went to his projects page and I see a video, right? And there's nothing else but this video. So I press play on the video. And as it unfolds, it is Dan Tilley in the video playing the mandolin, as pictured here in this screenshot. Now, if you guys don't know, mandolin is a string instrument that's incredibly intricate and requires a lot of dexterity and finger movement. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know Dan, He's cute, he's funny, he's talented, and he plays the mandolin. Like, what can't this guy do, right? And the video was amazing, and it had some very unique camera angles. It was dynamic. The sound quality was awesome. But when I finished watching the video, what could I conclude about Dan Tilley?
He's a musician.
That he can shred the mandolin. Is that what he wanted me to learn about him on his portfolio website? No. Because the truth is that Dan Tilley, created this entire video. He shot it, he edited it, he sound engineered it, whereby he recorded separate audio tracks, outside of what was going on here, and then timed it so that when the audio was playing, it matched the finger movements that was happening in the video, right? It was beautifully done. But none of that was communicated because he put this piece of content on the page and gave me no context to understand his full involvement and the full scope of the work that he did on this project. Because not only was he the producer of the video, the camera guy on the video, the editor of the video, the sound engineer of all of these things, he was also the on-screen talent. But the page didn't even say any of that, right? And so, in that sense, it was a fail. Because on his portfolio website, which was intended to show his skills in media communication, specifically in the production realm, we didn't get any of that. All we could walk away with knowing was Dan Tilley can play the mandolin, right? So when I say give me the context to understand the content that you're sharing, that's what I mean. All right, do you guys have any questions about these 10 important commandments for the class? Can someone, let's just go back and make the list really quickly. Tell me, what were they? 10 of them.
Meaningful hyperlinks.
Meaningful hyperlinks. No center aligned paragraph text.
Content, not sure. Context.
Context for your content. We got 3 out of 10. Headings.
Don't put pictures.
No pictures of words. Leverage headings, subheadings, and bulleted lists to break up dense paragraph text.
Yes.
What else?
Mind the fold.
Mind the fold. Apply color contrast. Doing a good job, Brian.
You are.
Somebody help Brian.
Make all headings and lists.
Headings and lists. Inset padding on all of your content. 2 more. Anybody? We can just step back in these slides.
Never copy and paste.
Never copy and paste from one environment to the next. We got 1 more. What is the missing component? This is it. Add image titles and descriptions to all of your galleries and slideshows. All right, you guys, that was your 10 Commandments lecture. This is going to be posted for you in FSO somewhere for you to refer back to if you have a question about anything that was shared here. I definitely appreciate your attention to this one because, as I said before, important stuff.